Welcome to this Good Friday service of music and meditations. My name is George Smith, and I serve as the rector of St. Mark's. And I want to welcome you, those who are here in the sanctuary, and also those on Zoom and YouTube. We will begin by reading chapter 15 from Mark's Gospel, and I invite the other persons offering the meditations to come and stand with me, and we will read through chapter 15, taking turns.
Jesus before Pilate. As soon as it was morning, the chief priests held a consultation with the elders and scribes and the whole council. They bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" He answered him, "You say so." Then the chief priests accused him of many things. Pilate asked him again, "Have you no answer? See how many charges they bring against you." But Jesus made no further reply, so that Pilate was amazed.
Pilate hands Jesus over to be crucified. Now at the festival, he used to release a prisoner for them, anyone for whom they asked. Now a man called Barabbas was in prison with the rebels who had committed murder during the insurrection. So the crowd came and began to ask Pilate to do for them according to his custom. Then he answered them, "Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews?" For he realized that it was out of jealousy that the chief priests had handed him over. But the chief priest stirred up the crowd to have him release Barabbas for them instead. Pilate spoke to them again. "Then what do you wish me to do with the man you call the King of the Jews?" They shouted back, "Crucify him." Pilate asked them, "Why? What evil has he done?" They shouted all the more, "Crucify him." So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released Barabbas for them. And after flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified.
Then the soldiers led him into the courtyard of the palace, that is, the governor's headquarters, and they called together the whole cohort. And they clothed him in a purple cloak, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on him. And they began saluting him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They struck his head with a reed, spat upon him, and then knelt down in homage before him. After mocking him, they stripped him of the purple cloak and put his own clothes on him. And then they led him out to crucify him.
They compelled a passerby who was coming in from the country to carry his cross. It was Simon of Cyrene, the father of Alexander and Rufus. Then they brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of a skull. And they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And they crucified him and divided his clothes among them, casting lots to decide what each should take. It was 9 o'clock in the morning when they crucified him. The inscription of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." And with him they crucified two bandits, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads and saying, "Aha, you who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself and come down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests, along with the scribes, were also mocking him among themselves and saying, "He saved others, he cannot save himself. Let the Messiah, the King of Israel, come down from the cross now, so that we may see and believe." Those who were crucified with him also taunted him.
When it was noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. At 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of the bystanders heard it, they said, "Listen, he's calling for Elijah." And some ran, filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it to him to drink, saying, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to take him down." Then Jesus gave a loud cry and breathed his last. The curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. Now Mary, the mother of Jesus, saw where the body was laid. Now when the centurion who stood facing him saw that this was how he breathed his last, he said, "Truly, this man was God's son." There was also women looking from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, the younger, and of Joseph, and Salome. These used to follow him and provided for him when he was in Galilee. And there were many other women who had come up with him from Jerusalem.
When evening had come, and decided it was the day of the preparation, that is, the day before the Sabbath, Joseph of Arimathea, a respected member of the council, who was also himself awaiting expectantly for the kingdom of God, went boldly to the Pilate and asked him for the body of the Jesus. Then Pilate wondered if they were already dead, and summoning the centurion, he asked him whether he had been dead for some time. When he learned from the centurion that he was dead, he granted the body to Joseph. Then Joseph brought a linen cloth and taking down to the body, wrapping it in the linen cloth, and laid it in the tomb that had been went out in the rock. He then rolled the stone again to the door of the tomb. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, saw the body was laid.
Where are you? The very first question. I heard the sound of you in the garden and I was afraid. This is the answer to the first question. Genesis chapter 3. You have answers, God has questions. To ask questions or to question is a hallmark of being human and is the first thing that a child does when it learns to talk. Children have so many questions because they are constantly moving around and want to understand the world they find themselves in. Adults who have questions are those who are curious, able to challenge injustices and harmful practices. To question is not just to contemplate or to consider. To question is to seek. To question is to be on a quest. To question is to be made in the image of God who asks questions. God was looking for the first humans in the Garden of Eden, searching for them, like a parent searching for a child who has disappeared from their sight. The first question asked by a human, am I my brother's keeper? That's Cain to God. It was Cain's statement in the form of a question. It was a statement, not a question, really. And the corollary to a lie, I don't know, when God asked where Abel is. God then has a question, what have you done? Genesis chapter 4. On Good Friday, we are confronted with many difficult questions, questions of life and death, cruelty, injustice, meaning, and our place in the world and our own discipleship. There is one question in particular that we must contend with. The identical question is in the Good Friday accounts in all four Gospels. Pilate says to Jesus, "Are you the King of the Jews?" Jesus answers truthfully, "You say so." And Pilate will say so 4 more times. It is only Pilate and Pilate's soldiers, not the chief priests or the crowd or anyone else, who calls Jesus the King of the Jews. Pilate asks the crowd, "Do you want me to release for you the King of the Jews? And what do you wish me to do with the man you call the King of the Jews?" The soldiers mock Jesus, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." And the death sentence dictated by Pilate reads, "The King of the Jews." Is Jesus the King of the Jews? Well, it's Pilate's question, and if we ask him, we know that it isn't a real question, but a mocking statement. Pilate is part of and represents a system of power, control, and contempt for both justice and human life itself. Innocent life is easily bargained away. You can call it Rome or Nazi Germany or Russia or racism. Pilate echoes the voice of Cain, who uses a question as a lie based in murder. The perversion of questions from a mean of discovery and seeking into instruments of control and murder is deeply embedded in our human history. Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One? The chief priests asks Jesus this, and Jesus answers, "I am." As the Messiah, Jesus announces that the kingdom of God has come near. Even the crowds understand this on Palm Sunday, according to Mark, when they shout, "Blessed is the coming kingdom of our ancestor David." As Christians, we do claim that Jesus is King of kings and Lord of lords. The standard confession of the early Christians was Jesus is Lord. But in the long history of Christianity, Pilate and his fake question, his contempt and his blindness got under our skin, in our blood, into our hearts and in our church. We have heard this mocking statement, "King of the Jews," as license to commit violence. On Good Friday, incidents of anti-Semitism spike. Churchgoers, in the name of Jesus, having heard phrases like "King of the Jews," His blood be upon us and our children, and crucify him, have gone out and committed acts of violence against Jews and their synagogues. Crusades, expulsions, inquisitions, the Holocaust, and now ongoing acts of anti-Semitism in our own day convict us as being disciples of Pilate, not Jesus. Many synagogues, including Etz Haim in Lombard, 13 minutes from St. Mark's, hire an armed guard for their Shabbat services, which are on Friday evenings. The cost at $40 an hour comes to $360 per week. None of the churches in Glen Ellen that I know of hire armed guards. Good Friday is a dangerous time for Jews. It is a dangerous time for Christians, too, that we fall into the heart and mind of Pilate or Cain and turn against our brothers and sisters. On Good Friday, God asks the church, "Where are you?" Let us not answer by hiding or coming up with an excuse or a lie, but with humility. Let us be renewed in the love of Jesus for the whole world, especially Jews. Maybe we should send a check to Etz Haim to pay for their armed guard.
Then the governor's soldiers brought Jesus to the praetorium and gathered the whole company around him, and stripping him naked, they threw a robe of scarlet over him and put it in his head, and a crown woven of thorns, and a reed in his right hand. And they knelt before him and mocking him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Thinking about what happened in this verse, the terrible irony that you perceive. What does this verse tell about human ignorance, cruelty, and foolishness? How this verse symbolizes that the world still does to this Creator and Redeemer today. They stripped Jesus naked and clothed him in a scarlet or purple robe. This cloth may have been that of the soldiers or the old cloak of Pilate. Purple was the color of royalty. This cloak was mockingly thrown over the shoulders of the man who pretended to be a king. Of course, no king is completed without his crown. Jesus' tormentors made the thorns when the thorny fruit that grow in the region of the Palestine, and put in his hand a reed imitating a royal scepter. They bore the mockingly of him, saluting him as the King of the Jews. But it was the mockery of the priests consisting of the attack on the spiritual authority of Christ. The solid mocking his political sovereignty, the real king, present in a burlesque ceremony, wearing a monkey clothes. He who offered a cloth in a sinful world in his own garments of the righteousness and perfection was now clothed in garments of mockery. And yet the incredible thing is that Jesus endured this because of his love for those who had treated him that way. How many of us, the moment someone treats us badly, overlooks in that way and with anger, reacting angrily and try to return it? Look at the example Jesus giving us regarding how to respond to this treatment. Entonces los soldados del gobernador llevaron a Jesús al pretorio y reunieron alrededor de él toda la compañía, y desnudándole le echaron encima un manto de escarlata y pusieron sobre su cabeza una corona tejida de espinas y una caña en su mano derecha. Hincando la rodilla delante de él, les escarnecían diciendo: "Salve el Rey de los judíos". Piensan acerca de lo que sucede en estos versículos. ¿Qué terrible ironía percibes? ¿Qué nos dicen estos versículos acerca de la ignorancia, la crueldad y la necedad humana? ¿De qué modo estos versículos simbolizan lo que el mundo hace aún hoy en su Creador y Redentor? Desnudaron a Jesús y lo pusieron con un manto escarlata o púrpura. Este manto puede ser el de un soldado o un manto de un viejo en propiedad de Pilatos. El púrpura era el color de la realeza. Este manto fue arrojado en el son de la burla sobre los hombros de un hombre que pretendía ser rey. Por supuesto, ningún rey es completo sin su corona. Los atormentadores de Jesús fabricaron de espinas, de los espinos arbustos que crecen en la región de Palestina, y pusieron en sus manos una caña, imitando un cetro real. Se inclinaron burlándose ante él, saludándolo como un rey de los judíos. Pero mientras la burla de los sacerdotes consistía en un ataque a la autoridad espiritual de Cristo, los soldados se burlaron de su soberanía política. El verdadero rey sufrió en ceremonia burlesca, vistiendo ropa burlona. El que ofrecía vestir al mundo pecaminoso con su propia ropa de justicia y perfección, estaba ahora vestido en vestiduras de burla. Y no obstante, lo increíble es que Jesús soportó todo esto por causa de su amor por aquellos que lo atormentaban así. ¿Cuántos de nosotros, en el momento en que alguien nos trata mal o aún nos mira con ira, reaccionamos con enojo y procuramos devolvérselo? Observa el ejemplo que nos dejó Jesús aquí con respecto a cómo respondió a este trato.
Pain, grief, these are unavoidable if one considers them to be alive. Pain and grief and suffering are things that remind us of our own humanity, and none less than the human that we find fully human in Jesus on the cross. So much so that women at the foot of the cross, finding a way to grieve when they're not really allowed to grieve the crucified, offer Jesus the first time wine mixed with myrrh. It's often thought that the myrrh mixed in with the wine is a bit of a narcotic agent. Maybe it will help to ease the suffering of those on the cross just a bit, to dull their senses. And if we believe that to be the case, then what is to be said about a Christ, fully human and yet fully divine, who, dying actively on a cross, says, "No, I will be fully present with you until the end. A man who, fully human, yet fully divine, argued with himself, with his Father in heaven, in the garden about this cup that he was to take, and yet accepted fully the punishment in order to set forth salvation for all. It is for us as living, breathing human beings to be fully present with our God, with our neighbor, and with ourselves, if we are to truly experience the God within us. On this Good Friday, it is often difficult to figure out why it is good. Well, this is the reason it is good, because we are human fully, and yet the divine lives within us, having gone through it to experience it with us. Grief, in its various forms, takes so many avenues, and I'm sure all of us in this room have experienced it at least once, if not many, many times in our lives. And we sometimes don't know why or where or how it will even creep up. I encourage us to think about the women who offer a little wine mixed with narcotic, and invite us to think fully first about dulling the pain and the senses, because it will make us less present with ourselves, with our neighbor, and with God. Choose to be fully present, even in those moments of grief, even in those moments of suffering, because the one who did it first did it for all, and we have seen the way forward. It is a Good Friday.
Let the Messiah, the King of Israel, come down from the cross now, so that we may see and believe. When Jesus hung from the cross, these words were spoken in mocking derision. But as an anxious child longing for faith, frightened that my doubts would condemn me, I once read them with earnest urgency. Why couldn't Jesus come down from the cross and thereby show the world who he truly was with a miracle so unmistakable that no one would doubt his identity as the living God? Why couldn't I witness such a sign to anchor my fragile faith once and for all? I didn't realize then that a great escape from the cross would not have been the miracle I thought it would be. The true miracle, the world-transforming power that heals broken hearts and brings life out of death, is to remain in solidarity with the suffering, even, especially, when it's possible to walk away. Had Jesus triumphantly burst his bonds in front of his executioners, inhaled his spirit back into his body, and slowly descended to the ground, the crowds would have been terrified. Such a raw display of power could only have reinforced mistaken conflations of invulnerability with divinity. But the true nature of God, love, all compassionate, all merciful, reveals and roots itself in the heart, not with fearful displays, but with embodied solidarity. Jesus stood with the vulnerable and the oppressed, feeding the hungry, healing the sick, welcoming the outcast, and erasing all boundaries by which we form identities over and against one another. And when his bold defiance of the powers that be, violence, exclusion, exploitation, and domination, landed Jesus on the cross as a warning not to tamper with the status quo, he spoke words of forgiveness to erase even the boundaries between himself and his executioners. In solidarity with the despised and condemned, Jesus, arms outstretched, embraced all who had ever been cast aside. In suffering with them, Jesus reveals that God is in every suffering human being, especially those mistaken to be God-forsaken. And with mercy on his lips, Jesus also embraces oppressors and persecutors with transformative love. By actively loving across all divisions and refusing to bypass the pain and humiliation of the cross to which such love inevitably leads, Jesus transcends all boundaries of us versus them and ultimately transcends death itself. New, abundant life flows not from arbitrary suffering, but from unhindered compassion. That's the miracle of the cross. I no longer crave supernatural signs to prove divine power for fear of what will happen if I don't believe. Perfect love that suffers with the most vulnerable and pours out mercy even when we're at our worst, casts out my fear of a wrathful God and replaces it with hope for the redemption of a violent, compassionate, starved world. But the cross isn't a miracle, so easily dismissed as inimitable. It's a model for us to emulate. We don't need proof of an all-powerful God so we can be certain we're going to heaven. We need to follow the model of Jesus, love enfleshed, and enter into the work of building heaven here and now. We're called into solidarity with those who are suffering to transform enmity into empathy and conflict into cooperation. If that means sacrificing privilege and safety, if it means seeing the humanity in our enemies and putting down our swords, if it means letting go of the pride of defining ourselves against others and recognizing our interconnection, if it means risking the wrath of those who would keep divisions in place, then these are the crosses of those who dare to bear them. It's not miraculous. It's not impossible. It's just hard and scary, and we're bound to stumble again and again. but I'm convinced that only the hard, dangerous work of embodied solidarity and boundless love will heal this crumbling world. Only such intentional, sustained, unflinching love can bring reconciliation and restoration to the war-torn lands of Palestine and Israel, Ukraine, Sudan, these fragile and fractured United States, and everywhere. Now I pray not for Jesus to come miraculously down from the cross, but to lead me as I struggle to carry my own. Help us all, Lord of love, to bear one another's burdens, to refuse to retreat from suffering until it is transformed into joy, to build the beloved community up from the ashes of violence and war.
Last words on a deathbed are often treasured. They can wrap up a life story, provide inspiration, reassurance, and occasionally humor. They are expected to offer wisdom to those who go on living, to justify the forgiveness, the love, or, alas, sometimes the disappointment of those present at the time of death. As a hospice chaplain, I learned that the last words of the most terminally ill people, those not killed in sudden, violent, or accidental deaths, are never heard, because the majority of them wait until they are by themselves to die, until their caregiver has gone home, left the room, or taken a phone call. Why? To spare those they love? To retain their privacy and dignity? It's amazing the power that even the dying have to choose. But Jesus of Nazareth did not have the luxury of choosing to die alone. His death was a spectator sport. And at least in the Gospel of Mark, his farewell is not that of a brave warrior breathing his last, an inspiring leader exhorting his followers to keep up the good fight, or a lover tenderly gasping to capture one last chance to say, I love you. The Nazarene dies after a last loud cry. Though physicians will tell you it is unlikely that anyone dying from the agonizing asphyxia of crucifixion could actually make any sound. Yet silence seems unlikely when we recall his heartbroken groan at Lazarus' tomb, his stentorian command that the stormy waves of Galilee's sea be stilled. We hear his words of rage as he turns over tables and drives the animals out from his Father's house. And, too, the gentle summons to Jairus' daughter, Talitha cum. All words of power, whether shouted or simply whispered. Jesus silent? Impossible. The loud cry speaks its own tragedy, but those words that precede it, such words, words of despair, utter loneliness, unthinkable horror, and a psalmist's astounding eloquence. My God, why have you forsaken me? As they echo, let's be honest about this choice of incarnation. What a crazy, incredible, idiotic thing to do. Who would choose the slings and arrows of an average human life? The mundane pain of hunger, nausea, a toothache, winter's cold, the cruelest cuts of unrequited love, grief, jealousy, fear, unjust anger, betrayal by a friend, betrayal by the one you loved, betrayal by the one you trusted. Judas once, Peter 3 times, they all ran away. And not just the ones for whom you give your life, but also the one who gave you life. Could it be this black hole that waits just beyond the torn flesh, the excrement, the tears that cannot be shed because the body has dried up? This black hole that swallows all light, all love, greedy, consuming, and unbearably completely silent, after giving it all this? My God, let there be then no light. Let the curtain in the temple tear from top to bottom, shearing away all sense of safety, belonging, or meaning. Forgotten, broken, turned into something less than human, less than living, less than everything. Why have you abandoned me? Who would choose that? Who? One of my best friends, knowing that I was grieving the death of my mother this past Christmas, sent me the sheet music for an Advent song her choir was performing. It is not an Easter song, but it is, I think, a Good Friday song, a song that reminds us as we weep at the foot of the cross, who the one is who would and did make that choice, and why. These are the lyrics written by Susan Bursma. There is a yearning in hearts weighed down by ancient grief and centuries of sorrow. There is a yearning in hearts that in the darkness hide and in the shades of death abide, a yearning for tomorrow. There is a yearning for the promised one, the firstborn of creation. There is a yearning for the Lord who visited his own and by his death for sin atoned to bring to us salvation. Emmanuel, Emmanuel, within our hearts, the yearning. There is a yearning that fills the hearts of those who await the day of his appearing. There is a yearning when all our sorrows are erased and we shall see the one who placed within our hearts the yearning. Emmanuel, Emmanuel within our hearts, the yearning. They were true words, utterly sincere and human words that Jesus of Nazareth spoke in his very real despair and suffering before he cried out and died. But they were not the last word, not his and not ours. The last word was then and is now and ever shall be, Emmanuel, God with us.
Though we know that the dawn is coming, we need to pause in the empty night to know ourselves and meet our neighbors. The stone is rolled, the tomb is closed, the way is shut. Whence now, O Lord? The darkness is quiet, cool and removed. The only brightness is memory, shining as the sun cannot. This could be a place for contemplation. This could be a place for peace. It could be a place of answer. It could be a place for recuperation. In darkness, we see things we could not otherwise. In darkness, we receive wisdom otherwise obscured. This could be the place of rebirth, to begin again. Begin again. We began to hope. We thought the light had come. The first temple, our second temple, our David, our Isaiah. We trusted. We gave. We built our lives around you. This person we ate with, we dreamt about. Here, God with us, now. To whom would we go? Only you have the words of life. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. But this peace feels only the peace of death after brutality. It is a place where the question is cut short. It is a place of end while the intent was to strive. The way is shut. This is where we are now. Now we are taken by the hand to overlook a valley that we assume to be delight and find it to be instead an abomination of desecration. I reach out my hand to grasp my master, and I pass through a great ghost of apparition and immateriality. Gone. Do not go where I cannot follow, I beg of you. The tomb is closed. The way is shut. The mouth is silenced. The breath is exhaled. The voice crying in the wilderness is now the abyss calling. This great darkness beckons us, confirms all that live must die. Sheol, the great shadow world of nothing, seems to stay king in dreary victory. Persephone is in Hades. Is not her spring a foolish dream? Won't those who walked and spoke, being raised from the dead, even Lazarus, die yet again? Doesn't the beloved daughter of the house of Jairus know she will sleep again? Won't this grave close over all of us, each alone, quietly sank into the pit? There is no mention of you in death, the Lord said unto my Lord. They placed a stone on the mouth. The cry from Golgotha might echo in our minds, an echo alone. The scream, do not go gentle into that good night, carrying us all within, as flights of thieving angels see thee to thy rest. That scream is hushed. That breath is expelled. Whither door now, Lord? We look down. What are these hands? What are they for? They operate, but what is their purpose? We fold linen. We carry baskets. We wash with precious perfume, but they are empty. Their labor is in vain. Their hope of glory is now under the depths, and they cannot call for sorrow or salvation. De profundis, but the mouth is covered. Hands rolled that stone. Hands hewed that stone. Hands threw stones to skip across joyful waters. Hands held chisel and mallet to craft things of simple beauty. Hands prepared our food, blessed our heads. Hands are gentle. Hands hold rage. Hands grasp each other in despair. Hands have rolled the stone to close the tomb. Those who sat in darkness have seen a great light, a light to bring light to the nations. A light shined in the darkness, and the darkness knew it not. The tomb is closed. Darkness covers the land. The depths roll over. The light is snuffed, quiet and empty. They may play the flute, but we cannot dance. They may sing a lament, but we cannot mourn. How can I not weep? How can I weep? The flower grows next to me. The tree stretches to the sky. Nature gives, nature takes away, dust to dust. How can the great sadness and horror within find purchase to unfold into the world? The way is shut. The stone is rolled. The way is shut, and breath cannot escape. Brightest and best of all the stars, please dawn on our darkness. Lend us thy light.
Thank you all for attending this service of meditations and music. And for those who wish, you may receive communion from the reserved sacrament. Come forward and we'll have this prepared in just a moment. We also have a gluten-free host, and if that's your preference, let us know. If you would like a blessing, come forward and cross your arms in this way. Thank you.